The German officer stepped over the frozen body of his own radioman, blood still pooling in the snow beneath him. It was 3:47 in the morning on December 19, 1944, in the Ardennes forest near Bastogne, Belgium. SS Obersturmführer Klaus Reinhardt had been fighting for 6 days straight since the start of what would become known as the Battle of the Bulge. His company had lost 43 men in the past 72 hours, not to artillery, not to tanks, not to rifle fire. They had been cut down by a weapon the SS had openly mocked during training exercises back in Germany, a weapon German intelligence had dismissed as primitive, inefficient, and tactically worthless. The Americans called it the Thompson submachine gun. Reinhardt's men had called it the gangster weapon, a crude spray and pray device better suited for Chicago criminals than modern warfare. They had laughed about it in barracks, joked that American soldiers needed automatic fire because they could not shoot straight. Now, Reinhardt was not laughing. In the past 6 hours alone, his company had been ambushed 3 times by American infantry positions. Each time, the night erupted with the distinctive rattling roar of Thompson submachine guns firing in disciplined bursts from concealed positions. Each time, his men fell in clusters, torn apart by 45 caliber rounds that hit with devastating stopping power. The SS troops carried the finest small arms Germany could produce: the Sturmgewehr 44 assault rifle, the MG 42 machine gun, the Walther P38 pistol. Their equipment was superior in every technical specification. Their training was elite. Their combat experience extensive. None of it mattered when the Thompsons opened fire from 15 meters away in the darkness. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The Thompson submachine gun entered service with the United States military in 1921, though its design originated during the First World War. General John Taliaferro Thompson, a career Army officer who had served as chief of the Small Arms Division during World War I, believed future warfare would require a weapon that combined the firepower of a machine gun with the portability of a rifle. He called it a trench broom, designed specifically for close-quarters combat in the confined spaces of trench warfare. The weapon was too late for the First World War. The Armistice was signed in 1918 before Thompson's design reached production. But Thompson, working with Theodore Eickhoff, a talented engineer, continued development through the Auto-Ordnance Corporation, a company Thompson had founded specifically to manufacture the weapon. The first production model, designated the Thompson M 1921, appeared in 1921. It was a masterpiece of engineering. For its time, the weapon used a delayed blowback system with a Blish lock, a mechanism that allowed the bolt to remain locked during the critical milliseconds after firing, while chamber pressure dropped to safe levels. The gun fired the .45 ACP cartridge, the same round used in the M1911 pistol that had become standard U.S. military sidearm. The Thompson could fire up to 800 rounds per minute in full automatic mode. It weighed 10 pounds unloaded, 13 pounds with a 50-round drum magazine. The effective range was approximately 50 meters, though skilled shooters could hit targets at 100 meters. The weapon was beautifully machined. Every part was manufactured to precise tolerances using high-quality steel. The receiver was milled from a solid block of steel. The barrel was carefully rifled. The sights were adjustable. The stock was finely finished walnut. The Thompson was not a mass-produced weapon. It was a craftsman's creation, built to last and built to perform. It was also extraordinarily expensive. In 1921, a single Thompson cost $200. That was more than twice the price of a quality hunting rifle. It was more expensive than many automobiles. The high cost limited sales dramatically. The United States military showed minimal interest initially. The Army was downsizing after World War I. Budgets were tight. The standard infantry weapon, the M1903 Springfield rifle, worked perfectly well. There seemed little need for an expensive automatic weapon for close combat. Police departments purchased a few Thompsons, but not many. The weapon was too expensive for most municipal budgets. Civilian sales were minimal, restricted largely to wealthy gun enthusiasts and, unfortunately, organized crime figures who could afford the steep price. During the 1920s and 1930s, the Thompson became associated with Prohibition-era gangsters. The weapon appeared in numerous criminal incidents, including the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in Chicago in 1929, where 7 men were killed by attackers using Thompson submachine guns. The media called it the Tommy gun, a nickname that stuck despite Auto-Ordnance's attempts to distance the weapon from its criminal reputation. By 1939, Auto-Ordnance had sold fewer than 15,000 Thompson submachine guns in 18 years of production. The company was nearly bankrupt. The weapon, despite its technical excellence, appeared to be a commercial failure. European armies showed little interest. British military observers evaluated the Thompson in the 1920s and concluded it was too heavy, too expensive, and consumed ammunition too quickly to be practical for general infantry use. The British Army preferred the bolt-action Lee Enfield rifle, which had served well in World War I. German military analysts reviewed the Thompson design in the early 1930s. Their assessment was dismissive. The weapon was mechanically complex, expensive to manufacture, and tactically limited. German doctrine emphasized rifle marksmanship at longer ranges. Close-quarters automatic weapons were considered specialty items for specific situations, not general infantry weapons. The German analysis concluded that the Thompson represented American industrial excess, a weapon over-engineered and overbuilt for a tactical niche that did not justify the cost. One German weapons expert's report from 1933 stated that the Thompson was typical of American military thinking, emphasizing firepower over discipline, automatic fire over aimed shots, and brute force over tactical sophistication. The report suggested that armies equipped with Thompsons would waste ammunition and train soldiers to rely on automatic fire rather than developing proper marksmanship skills. The assessment was logical within German military doctrine of the time. German infantry training emphasized precision shooting with bolt-action rifles. German soldiers were trained to make every shot count, to fire only when they had identified targets, to conserve ammunition. The idea of a weapon that could expend a 50-round magazine in less than 10 seconds seemed wasteful and undisciplined. This perspective was reinforced by cost analysis. The Thompson cost approximately 10 times more to manufacture than a standard bolt-action rifle. For the price of equipping 1 soldier with a Thompson, an army could equip 10 soldiers with rifles. The mathematics seemed clear. Submachine guns were a luxury, not a necessity. The Soviet Union took a different approach. Soviet military planners, evaluating combat experiences from their civil war and border conflicts, recognized the value of automatic weapons for close combat. The Red Army developed the PPS-41 submachine gun, which entered service in 1941. The PPS was everything the Thompson was not. It was cheap, simple, and designed for mass production. The weapon used stamped metal parts instead of machined components. It could be manufactured by semi-skilled workers in factories with basic equipment. The Soviets produced over 6 million PPSA submachine guns during World War II. The Germans, after encountering Soviet submachine guns in combat, began developing their own designs. The MP-40, commonly called the Schmeisser, entered service in 1940. It was well designed, reliable, and far less expensive than the Thompson. German factories produced approximately 1 million MP-40 submachine guns during the war. But in 1939, as war broke out in Europe, the Thompson remained a curiosity, an expensive American weapon with limited military adoption. Then everything changed. Britain went to war with Germany in September 1939. By May 1940, German forces had swept through France, and British forces had evacuated from Dunkirk, leaving behind most of their heavy equipment. Britain faced potential invasion with a desperate shortage of weapons. The British government contacted every arms manufacturer in the neutral United States, placing orders for any weapons available. Auto-Ordnance received an order for 90,000 Thompson submachine guns. The order was later increased to 108,000. Suddenly, the failing company had more business than it could handle. The problem was production capacity. Auto-Ordnance did not manufacture the Thompsons themselves. They contracted production to Colt Patent Firearms and other manufacturers. The existing production methods were slow. Each Thompson required extensive machining, skilled labor, and time. The guns were still being built like precision instruments, not military weapons. Auto-Ordnance needed to simplify the design for mass production. Working with Savage Arms Company, which took over primary production, engineers redesigned the Thompson, the M, 1928. A one variant simplified the firing mechanism, eliminated the Blish lock, and reduced the number of machined parts. The weapon still maintained the Thompson's reliability and firepower, but could be manufactured more quickly and cheaply. The cost per unit dropped from $200 to $70. Production rates increased. By 1941, when the United States entered the war, Savage Arms was producing thousands of Thompsons per month. The weapon that had been a commercial failure for 20 years suddenly became standard equipment for American infantry, paratroopers, tank crews, and rangers. The United States Army initially planned to issue Thompsons to squad leaders and special units. The weapon was not intended as a primary infantry arm. Most soldiers would carry the M1 Garand rifle, but combat experience quickly changed doctrine. American troops fighting in North Africa in 1942 discovered that much combat occurred at ranges under 100 meters, often much closer. In urban warfare, in forests, in mountains, and in night fighting, the Thompson's automatic fire proved devastatingly effective. Units equipped with Thompsons requested more. Soldiers who had trained with rifles requested Thompsons. Reports from company commanders consistently praised the weapon's stopping power and reliability. The .45 caliber round, while subsonic and lacking long-range capability, hit with tremendous energy at close range. Soldiers hit by Thompson fire went down and stayed down. The large, slow-moving bullet created massive wound channels and transferred all its energy into the target. German soldiers who survived encounters with Thompson-equipped American units reported that being hit by a .45 caliber round felt like being struck by a hammer. The impact was stunning, often incapacitating even with non-lethal hits. This stopping power mattered tremendously in close combat, where split seconds determined survival. A soldier hit by a Thompson round typically could not return fire. By 1943, American production of Thompson submachine guns exceeded 100,000 per year. The weapon appeared in every theater of war. Marines carried Thompsons in the Pacific Island campaigns. Army Rangers carried them during the Normandy invasion. Paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions carried them during operations in France, Holland, and Germany. Tank crews kept them for close defense. The Thompson became iconic, appearing in newsreels, photographs, and war reporting. It became synonymous with American infantry, a symbol of U.S. Firepower. German intelligence continued to dismiss the weapon. Reports from German military analysts in 1943 described the Thompson as evidence of American industrial waste and tactical naivety. One German Army intelligence assessment stated that American reliance on submachine guns demonstrated poor marksmanship training and lack of fire discipline. The report suggested that German infantry, equipped with superior rifles and machine guns, would defeat American units in open combat where German marksmanship and tactical skill would prevail. German SS units, considered the elite of German combat forces, received specific briefings about American weapons and tactics. The Thompson was mentioned as a weapon favored by American troops but limited in effectiveness beyond close range. SS training emphasized maintaining distance from American infantry positions and engaging with rifles and machine guns at ranges where the Thompson could not effectively return fire. The SS troops were confident. They carried the finest equipment Germany produced. They had years of combat experience on the Eastern Front, where they had faced Soviet forces equipped with millions of submachine guns. They had developed tactics for dealing with automatic weapons, maintaining fire discipline, using superior marksmanship, and exploiting the limited range of submachine guns. German confidence was not entirely unfounded. In open terrain during daylight, German infantry with rifles could engage American troops at 300 to 500 meters, well beyond Thompson range. German machine guns could suppress American positions from distances where return fire was ineffective. German tactics emphasized long-range engagement, fire and maneuver, and combined arms coordination. In those conditions, the Thompson's limitations were real. But the Ardennes forest, in December 1944, was not open terrain in daylight. It was dense woods, steep hills, narrow roads, small villages, and most critically, long winter nights where visibility dropped to a few meters. In those conditions, every advantage shifted to the Americans with their Thompsons. The night of December 19th into December 20th, 1944, became known among the survivors of SS Panzergrenadier Regiment 25 as the Night of the Thompsons. What happened in those hours would be documented in after-action reports, interrogation records, and the personal accounts of soldiers on both sides. The facts were undisputed, though their implications would take years to fully understand. At 0200 hours, elements of the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich were advancing through the Ardennes forest toward the critical road junction at Bastogne. The American 101st Airborne Division was encircled in the town, and German forces were attempting to eliminate the pocket before reinforcements could arrive. SS Obersturmführer Klaus Reinhardt's company, part of the assault force, was moving through heavy forest along a logging road when the first ambush occurred. The Americans had established a defensive position in a narrow ravine where the road descended between two steep hillsides. The position was invisible in the darkness until the lead German squad entered the kill zone. Then the Thompsons opened fire. The sound was distinctive, a rolling thunder of overlapping automatic fire that echoed through the trees. 45 caliber rounds tore through the lead squad at a range of less than 20 meters. 8 men went down in the first seconds. The Americans were firing from prepared positions on both hillsides, creating a devastating crossfire that caught the German column in the open. Reinhardt's training took over. He ordered his men to take cover and return fire. German rifles cracked in response, muzzle flashes revealing positions on both sides. But the Americans were dug in, protected by logs and earth. The German return fire was largely ineffective. The Thompsons continued firing in short, controlled bursts. The American troops had learned not to waste ammunition with long automatic sprays. Instead, they fired 3 to 5 round bursts, adjusted aim, and fired again. The discipline was impressive, and it was deadly. Reinhardt attempted to flank the position, sending a squad up the left hillside to assault the American foxholes from the side. The squad moved carefully, using trees for cover, advancing in bounds. They nearly reached the American line when a second group of defenders, positioned farther back, opened fire with more Thompsons. The flanking squad was caught in the open on steep terrain. 5 men fell. The survivors retreated down the hill, carrying 2 wounded with them. The engagement lasted 17 minutes. When Reinhardt finally withdrew his company back up the road, he had lost 14 men killed and 9 wounded. The Americans had held their position without losing a single soldier. The German company had never even identified how many Americans they were fighting. Intelligence estimates suggested it was a reinforced platoon, perhaps 40 to 50 men. Against a German company of over 100, they had inflicted nearly 25% casualties and forced a retreat. This pattern repeated throughout, the night across multiple sectors. American airborne infantry, many of them veterans of Normandy and Holland, had established defensive positions throughout the forest around Bastogne. Most units were under strength, low on ammunition, and exhausted from days of continuous combat. But they had Thompsons, they knew the ground, and they understood that nighttime defensive fighting favoured automatic weapons at close range. At 03:15 hours, another SS company attempted to infiltrate through the lines south of Bastogne. They moved silently through the woods, confident in their training and night combat skills. German soldiers were among the best night fighters in the world, experienced from years of combat on the Eastern Front where night operations were common. They believed they could penetrate American positions, locate weak points, and create gaps for follow-on forces to exploit. They walked into a defensive network manned by paratroopers from the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. The Americans heard them coming. German soldiers, despite their training, made noise moving through frozen forest at night. Equipment rattled. Boots crunched on frozen ground. Whispered commands carried in cold air. The paratroopers waited until the Germans were well within the defensive zone, then triggered the ambush. 60 Thompsons opened fire simultaneously across a front of 200 meters. The Germans had walked into an L-shaped ambush, with American positions on 2 sides creating interlocking fields of fire. The Thompsons' rate of fire meant that 60 weapons could deliver over 400 rounds per second in the first burst. The actual volume of fire was less because the Americans were firing in controlled bursts, but the psychological impact was overwhelming. The forest erupted with muzzle flashes and the hammering roar of automatic weapons. The night, which had been nearly silent, suddenly became a chaos of sound and violence. German soldiers who survived described it as hell opening up around them. They could not see their attackers. They could only see muzzle flashes from elevated positions all around them and feel the impact of rounds hitting trees, equipment, and bodies. Training called for them to take cover, identify targets, and return fire. But there was no effective cover in the middle of a forest under fire from multiple directions. Trees provided concealment but not protection against 45 caliber rounds at close range. The Germans attempted to assault through the ambush, a standard counter-ambush tactic, but they were attacking uphill against prepared positions in darkness. American paratroopers, firing from foxholes with overhead cover, were protected against return fire. The Germans, advancing through open forest, were exposed. The assault broke down within minutes. German NCOs attempted to rally their men, but the volume of fire was too intense. Soldiers who tried to move forward were cut down. Those who stayed in place were methodically targeted by American shooters who could see German muzzle flashes every time they returned fire. After 8 minutes of sustained combat, the German company commander ordered a retreat. His men withdrew, carrying their wounded and leaving their dead. American casualties in this engagement totaled 3 wounded, none fatal. German casualties were catastrophic. The 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment's after-action report documented 37 confirmed German dead in the immediate engagement area, recovered after dawn. The actual German casualties were higher because the retreating Germans carried away many of their wounded and some of their dead. Post-war analysis of German unit records suggested the attacking company suffered approximately 55 casualties from a force of roughly 90 men, a 61% casualty rate. The same night, similar engagements occurred at dozens of locations around Bastogne. American defenders, equipped primarily with Thompsons, Moen-Garand rifles, and limited heavy weapons, held against German forces that were numerically superior and better equipped with armor and artillery. The pattern was consistent. German forces, attacking at night through forested terrain, walked into defensive positions, where American automatic weapons fire at close range proved devastatingly effective. The Thompson, dismissed by German intelligence as a gangster weapon unsuited for modern warfare, became the primary killing weapon in these engagements. Its 45 caliber rounds, fired from prepared positions at ranges under 50 meters, stopped attacking German soldiers with brutal efficiency. By dawn on December 20th, German casualty reports from multiple SS and Wehrmacht units showed losses that shocked commanders. One German regimental commander reported losing over 200 men in night fighting, most to small arms fire at close range. The Americans, he noted in his report, were using automatic weapons extensively and effectively. SS commanders, reviewing casualty figures and after-action reports, began to reassess their intelligence about American weapons and tactics. The Thompson, they realized, was not a gangster weapon. It was a purpose-built infantry weapon, optimized for exactly the kind of combat occurring in the Ardennes, close-quarters fighting in restricted terrain, where first-shot capability and volume of fire mattered more than long-range accuracy. But the reassessment came too late to change German tactics or doctrine. The Battle of the Bulge continued for weeks, and American forces, increasingly equipped with Thompsons and the newer M3 submachine gun, which was cheaper and simpler but less refined, held their positions and eventually counterattacked. The siege of Bastogne became legendary, memorialized by General Anthony McAuliffe's one-word response to German surrender demands: nuts. But the defense of Bastogne was not won by generals or memorable quotes. It was won by soldiers in foxholes who held their positions through cold, hunger, and continuous German attacks. And many of those soldiers held their positions with Thompson submachine guns that gave them the firepower to survive when German forces closed to contact range. The final casualty figures for German forces during the night fighting around Bastogne between December 18th and December 23rd remain disputed. American after-action reports documented approximately 600 German soldiers killed in small unit engagements during night fighting in that 5-day period. German records, which were incomplete due to unit disorganization and eventual retreat, acknowledged heavy casualties, but provided different numbers depending on the source. Post-war analysis by U. Army historians concluded that German forces suffered between 500 and 700 killed in night fighting around Bastogne during that week, with the majority of casualties occurring on the nights of December 19th and December 20th. The majority of these casualties were inflicted by small arms fire, and the majority of effective small arms fire came from Thompson submachine guns and Moen-Garand rifles. The Thompsons' contribution was disproportionate to the number in service because American doctrine increasingly assigned Thompsons to soldiers in positions where close combat was most likely: squad leaders, point men, scouts, and soldiers manning forward defensive positions. Klaus Reinhardt survived the Battle of the Bulge. He was captured by American forces in January 1945 during the German retreat. In post-war interviews conducted as part of the U.S. Army's Foreign Military Studies program, Reinhardt provided detailed accounts of German experiences in the Ardennes. He spoke extensively about the shock of encountering massed Thompson fire at night. German soldiers, he explained, had been trained to believe that American infantry relied on automatic weapons because they lacked marksmanship skills. The assumption was that automatic fire was wasteful and ineffective compared to disciplined rifle fire. The reality, Reinhardt discovered, was that automatic fire at close range in darkness was overwhelmingly effective regardless of marksmanship skills. When an American position erupted with Thompson fire at 20 meters, individual marksmanship became irrelevant. The volume of fire and the stopping power of the .45 caliber round created a beaten zone that was nearly impossible to assault through. Reinhardt stated in his interview that German intelligence had fundamentally misunderstood the Thompson's tactical role. They had evaluated it as if it were meant to be a rifle replacement for general infantry use. In that role, the Thompson was indeed inferior to a rifle. It had less range, less accuracy, and consumed ammunition at an unsustainable rate for general combat. But the dark Thompson was never meant to be a general infantry weapon. It was meant to be a specialist weapon for specific situations: close quarters defense, urban combat, night fighting, and assault operations. In those specific roles, the Thompson was extraordinarily effective, and the Americans had correctly identified when and how to use it. German doctrine, Reinhardt explained, emphasized combined arms coordination and engagement at optimal ranges for each weapon system. Machine guns engaged at medium range, rifles engaged at longer range. Infantry maneuvered to bring weapons to bear at advantageous ranges. This doctrine worked well in open terrain during daylight. It failed in close terrain at night when visibility dropped to a few meters, and combat often occurred at ranges where the Thompson excelled and rifles were at a disadvantage. The winter conditions in the Ardennes exacerbated these problems. Cold weather made bolt-action rifles harder to operate quickly. Frozen hands fumbled with ammunition. Darkness made aimed fire nearly impossible. Under these conditions, a weapon that could deliver automatic fire without precise aiming became tactically superior to weapons that required careful sight alignment and trigger control for each shot. The irony, Reinhardt noted, was that German forces had experience with similar weapons on the Eastern Front. Soviet submachine guns had inflicted heavy casualties on German troops in close combat. German forces had responded by developing their own submachine guns and modifying tactics. But the lessons from the Eastern Front apparently had not been fully integrated into intelligence assessments of American weapons. German analysts had dismissed the Thompson as inferior to German submachine guns like the MP-40, without recognizing that both weapons served the same tactical purpose. The MP-40 was technically superior in some ways. It was lighter, simpler, and cheaper to produce. But the Thompson's .45 caliber round had greater stopping power than the MP-40's 9mm round. At the ranges where submachine guns were used, the Thompson's disadvantages in weight and complexity became less important than its advantage in hitting power. American soldiers who used both weapons generally preferred the Thompson despite its weight. The weapon felt solid, absorbed recoil well, and produced devastating effects on target. The psychological impact of the Thompson's sound and visible effects built user confidence. Soldiers trusted the weapon because they saw it work. By the time the Battle of the Bulge ended in late January 1945, the Thompson had proven itself in the most demanding combat conditions of the European theatre. American forces had stopped the largest German offensive of the war, and infantry armed primarily with rifles, Thompsons, and limited support weapons had held defensive positions against German armour and mechanized infantry. The weapons themselves did not win battles. Soldiers won battles. But the right weapons, properly employed, gave soldiers the tools to succeed. The Thompson gave American infantry a capability that German intelligence had underestimated, and German forces had paid for with thousands of casualties. Production of the Thompson continued through the end of the war, though it was gradually supplemented and then replaced by the M3 submachine gun, which was cheaper and faster to produce. Total Thompson production during World War II exceeded 1.5 million units. The weapon served in every theatre of war and with every branch of the American military. The Thompson remained in service long after World War II ended. It saw combat in Korea, in the early years of Vietnam, and in various conflicts around the world where American weapons were supplied to Allied forces. The weapon's reliability, durability, and effectiveness ensured its longevity, despite being expensive and heavy compared to modern alternatives. The last, Thompsons were not officially retired from U.S. military service until the 1970s, over 50 years after the weapon entered production. Some law enforcement agencies continued using Thompsons into the 1980s. The weapon that had been a commercial failure in the 1920s became one of the most recognizable firearms in history, a symbol of American infantry power during the Second World War. The story of the Thompson is not primarily about technology or engineering, though the weapon represented both. It is about the gap between intelligence, assessment, and combat reality. German intelligence analysts, evaluating the Thompson based on doctrine, specifications, and assumptions about American industrial culture, concluded the weapon was tactically limited and strategically unimportant. Their assessment was logical, thorough, and completely wrong. The analysts failed to anticipate how the weapon would actually be used in combat. They evaluated it against the wrong criteria, measured it against the wrong standards, and dismissed it based on assumptions that did not survive contact with battlefield reality. 600 German soldiers, more or less, died in one sector during 1 week of fighting because their commanders believed intelligence reports that told them American automatic weapons were overrated and ineffective. Those soldiers attacked American positions at night, expecting to face rifle fire they could suppress with superior tactics and training. Instead, they encountered massed automatic fire at close range from prepared positions, and they died in numbers that shocked their commanders and invalidated every assumption German intelligence had made about the Thompson submachine gun. The lesson, if there is one beyond the specific tactical and technical details, is that dismissing enemy capabilities based on doctrine or preconception rather than evidence is a fatal error. The Germans believed the Thompson was a gangster weapon because it had been used by gangsters. They believed it was tactically worthless because it did not fit their doctrine. They believed American reliance on it proved American tactical inferiority. Every belief was wrong, and soldiers died because their intelligence services and commanders believed things that were not true. The Thompson did not win the Second World War. No single weapon won the war. But the Thompson, employed by soldiers who understood its strengths and used it in situations where those strengths mattered, contributed to American victory in ways that German intelligence never anticipated and German forces could not counter effectively. The weapon proved that industrial capability, tactical flexibility, and willingness to adopt weapons that fit actual combat conditions could overcome theoretical superiority and doctrinal elegance. The SS troops had mocked the Thompson in training exercises, dismissed it in intelligence briefings, and underestimated it in operational planning. Then they encountered it in combat, and their mockery turned to shock, their dismissal to reassessment, and their underestimation to respect purchased with casualties that could have been avoided if intelligence had been believed over doctrine and evidence over assumption. War is ultimately about matching capabilities to requirements under conditions of imperfect information and life-or-death consequences. The Americans matched the Thompson to close-quarters defensive combat and gave their infantry a weapon that worked for the missions they actually faced. The Germans evaluated the Thompson against criteria that mattered less than they thought, and paid for their miscalculation in blood, treasure, and ultimately in defeat. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.